Hello and welcome to the Fairhaven Church Parent Talks podcast, where we desire to equip and empower you as parents to lead well in your home. It is August 16th, which means school is starting for everybody, which means the summer's over. And I'm really sad about that. How do you guys feel about that?
I feel great. I always make the joke to all the kids in the kids ministry. I'm like, hey, welcome back to school. Guess who doesn't have to go anymore?
So, Johnny, kids pastor, you're mean to the kids about going back to school.
It's more of like a sassy.
Yep.
I feel like I should. I'm not mean. I'm a little sassy. I'm a little. They're sassy back though. Like I feel
hold
like
on
they
a second.
started more.
Last time that you were on the podcast, you admitted that you cheat during games with the kids.
It's like you rigged them, and like yeah. A little bit.
Okay.
This is not looking good for my job position right now, but that's fun. That's fun to win.
What about you, James? Are you excited for summer to be ending, or are you sad?
I feel like it's kind of mixed emotions for me because, like, this is my first, I guess last summer I was graduated, but this is my first summer of my life where, like, nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Where it's like my life hasn't been so much different during the summer. Yeah. So it is weird.
Wait. You are married now.
Well, yes, but that happened in the spring.
This is your first summer being married, though.
It is.
That's a big difference.
It is. But I'm, like, really excited for the fall because I am a very big football person.
Oh, yeah.
Love football. Mm-hmm. I love fall weather. It's nicer to get out and like go fishing and stuff. So I feel like I am kind of excited that summer's ending, even though I do like the summer.
Yeah. I'm always so sad. I don't like my kids going back to school, but
I can't stand the heat. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready for some fall.
Well, it's good to have you both here, Johnny and James. It'll be a good conversation as we wrap up the book of Daniel. But question for you, tied to our story today, is as a child or a teenager, do you remember ever breaking something that was of value or that you knew you'd get in trouble for breaking? I'll actually start because when I wrote this, I had an instant thought when I was a child. I must have been somewhere between the ages of 4 and 6. And I was playing hide and seek. I don't know. I'm the youngest in my family, so I don't know if anybody else was playing or they just were annoyed with me. So they I went and hid. But anyway, I hid behind a mirror in my parents' bedroom, like a full-length mirror. And that didn't end well.
Yeah.
It crashed to the floor in lots of pieces. So that's my story.
I had two stories pop in my mind. And I'll go with the latter because I was trying to figure out something of value that I broke. And I've broken a lot of things. But like I feel like the biggest thing that I broke in of value was my friend's nose on accident. And he was like he still is a good friend of mine. If he's watching this, shout out. We'll probably hang out sometime soon. But we were in the gym at Fairhaven, and I had a bouncy ball, and I was bouncing it. And I threw it too hard, and the bouncy ball broke, and then right into his nose.
Huh.
And yeah,
That's sad.
so that I feel like I was destroyed. Like I was like, I'm never gonna be invited over again. Like I destroyed his nose. His nose is always gonna be crooked, and his nose is still crooked.
Oh my goodness.
But we're still pretty good friends. We hang out all the time, and nothing really changed.
That's a much bigger deal than my mirror.
Yeah.
What about you?
When I was in high school, I played a lot of video games, and I used to get mad playing video games, which was really bad for me. But there was one night where we had lost a football game. So I got home at like 11, and I get on my video game, and I got really mad, and I spiked my phone into the ground. And instantly I was like, well, that was a bad idea. And I look at it, camera's busted. So I go up to my parents the next day. I'm like, hey, broke my phone, which it was still functioning and everything. I just couldn't use the camera. So I remember my dad said something along the lines of, well, that was stupid. And it didn't get replaced for like a while. So I just didn't have a camera for a bit.
Yeah.
But
good for your dad.
Yeah.
Power play.
Yeah.
Okay. So this week, we, like I said, are wrapping up our series on Daniel. So we'll be checking into the end of the book of Daniel. But I mentioned it a couple weeks ago. The book of Daniel is prophetic, and it points us to the book of Revelation. In fact, I would say it's more than that. it doesn't just point us there, but it is foundational for the book of Revelation. And so these two books really kind of go hand in hand, like they are tied together. And so it's really neat to see how God has woven that in through scripture in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And we can see how it all comes together. But what really sticks out with this last week in this series is the reminder that God's kingdom lasts forever. And so that's something we're going to be talking about. But James, summer's really busy. So I'm sure people have been like in and out, maybe not hearing all of these lessons that we've been in for the last several weeks in the book of Daniel. But it's a really important book following God's ways, the reminder that we need to do that, the reminder that we need to not be influenced by culture, that we need to trust God, have courage, walk with God every day. So, important book.
Yeah.
Can you help us to be reminded of or to tell them a little bit about what has happened over the past few weeks?
Yeah. So far we've been focusing on like the first 6 chapters of Daniel, which are a lot of the events that happened in Daniel and his friends' lives. And they were captured, we learned week 1 at like a pretty young age. They were somewhere around 14 to 16, taken to Babylon, and instantly the Babylonians tried to make them into Babylonians instead of Israelites. They tried to feed them new food, change their names, completely change their culture. And Daniel and his friends stood up to them and they're like, we're not going to do that because God has commanded us against eating those foods. So they stood up for their convictions and they chose God from a very young age, honestly. And it encourages us to hold tightly to our convictions. So we learned about that 3 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, we learned about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the fiery furnace. I feel like that's probably the second most popular story in the book of Daniel. But it's still such a great story because King Nebuchadnezzar had created this golden image of himself and was like, everybody has to worship this image or you're getting thrown into a fiery furnace. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood up against that and they're like, no, we're only going to worship our God. Get thrown into this furnace. It's so hot that the guards that threw them into the furnace were like disintegrated, which is insane. And when King Nebuchadnezzar looks into this furnace, he sees another person standing there. That person's the angel of the Lord. And it's such a cool story. And I think like my biggest takeaway and what we can learn from it is that like even when we're being persecuted for our faith, even when we are in the fire, when we're in trial, torment, God is there with us through all of that. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego only had to rely on God, and he was there with them. And we even see King Nebuchadnezzar is like, nobody is like the God of the Israelites. He didn't believe that God was the only God, and that's a whole other thing. But Nebuchadnezzar is able to see God's glory from that story. And then this past week, we learned about Daniel in the lion's den, which is the most popular story
everybody
in
knows
the book of
about that.
Daniel. Yeah. And in this story, we've been learning a lot about King Nebuchadnezzar, but a new king came into Babylon at that point. His name was Cyrus. And Cyrus was actually tricked by his officials who didn't like Daniel to sign into law an ordinance that if you are seen praying or worshiping anything but King Cyrus, you'd be thrown into a den of lions. And Daniel didn't just stop to refuse praying. Like, he did refuse to stop praying, but he refused to stop praying in public. Like, he still prayed with his window open 3 times a day where anybody could see that he was still worshiping his God. And I think that's a testament towards Daniel's reliance and trust in God and his plan, but also his faithfulness to God. He's thrown in the lion's den. We know that God sent down an angel to shut the lions' mouths. And it shows us that in suffering, God is our hope. Like, no matter what, we can stand firm in our faith because God is going to be there with us.
That's awesome. So today we're jumping into chapters 7 through 12. And these are some I mean, it's kind of like the first 6 chapters of Daniel are very story-like. It's easy to follow along, and then you get into 7 through 12, and it's
Mm,
like, what is happening
yeah.
here? What are they talking about? What is going on? And so we're going to hear about dreams that Daniel had and what they mean not only for the time of Daniel in Babylon with all of these things going on, but also what it means for us now and what it means for the end times. As you know, I mentioned Daniel, the book, and Revelation, those are tied together. And so, Johnny, you have been given
Yeah.
the amazing privilege of
The
talking
monumental task.
us through the significance of these chapters.
Yeah.
So good luck.
Well, before I go any further, I would like to point out that there is some back and forth, like that kind of ties in both the beginning portion and then the second portion of Daniel. Like you get the Daniel, he interpreted the dreams of the king, and the dreams of the king kind of point towards Daniel's visions, and he had multiple visions. So I'm not going to go deep into all of the visions, but I'll start out with the big one that where he has a vision of 4 beasts. And so here are the 4 beasts. I don't know if you guys are mental picture people, but you can close your eyes and try to picture them in your head. The first one is a lion with eagle wings. The second one is a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth. The third, a leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings. And then the last is a beast with 10 horns, large iron teeth, and was incredibly strong. Now, the big part of these visions that Daniel was having was pointing towards kingdoms. And so, thankfully, there was an angel who helped to interpret these dreams. But when we looked at the 4th and the last beast, as Daniel was looking at the horns, suddenly a smaller horn appeared, and 3 of the horns were torn out of place to make way for it. And the horn had eyes like a human and a mouth that was boastful. And so, these dreams are all very vivid, they have deep imagery, and a lot of the imagery of these dreams help to paint a picture, not just for Daniel, but for the readers to say, hey, like, this is something that, like, even the animals and the horns, like, everything pointed towards something. And interestingly enough, as Daniel is looking at these beasts, he sees a throne. He fixates on something that a being that he calls the Ancient One, which Ancient One is God. We're gonna spoil that one for you guys, but and he sees God the Father taking a fiery throne, and he begins to judge the 4 beasts. And so he starts with the last beast, the scary one with the horns and the teeth, and he destroys that beast, and then he removes the authority from the other 3 beasts. And so when we look at these, the 4 beasts represent the 4 big kingdoms: Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, which goes all the way back to the dream that the king had. But then it gets progressed even further. Daniel has another vision where it's a ram. It has 2 horns. One horn is bigger than the other horn, even though the bigger horns start coming in after the smaller horn. Then he sees a goat, and the goat starts growing horns, and then there's a little horn. And so over and over again, we kind of get these pictures of these kingdoms that are coming in. And oftentimes it's the same, like Daniel's having the same vision with different details in it. It's captivating this big picture of all of these kingdoms and how God is sitting on his throne and he will judge them all. And oftentimes when we read these, like, it gets confusing, and you can kind of look at all the details and kind of, people are like, oh, is this Alexander the Great, or is this some Syrian, there's a lot of speculation, and that's hard to say this is what the author intended, because the author is God who spoke through Daniel's dreams, and God ultimately was saying, hey, there is a timeline here of all of these future kingdoms, and at the end, I will establish my kingdom through my son Jesus. In fact, in one of the visions, I have it in my notes here. Daniel sees someone coming down from the clouds of heaven, approaching God, and he is given authority, honor, and sovereignty over all of the world. That was after all the beasts were removed from their authority. We see Jesus coming down. And so Daniel's having these dreams, and when we look at it, we're not supposed to look at it as like, this guy's kind of crazy. But like when the people at the time were looking at it, they saw hope, that there was a hope for future generations. They were coming in from captivity and they're like, hey, there is something coming that it will be better.
Yeah.
And ultimately that is Jesus. And one of the cool things that we can do when we read this is then flip to Revelation, as you're saying, because Revelation uses so much of the imagery from Daniel that it's supposed to inspire people that were, John was like on the island of Patmos on around 85 AD. He's like, these people are going to be inspired because there is hope. And no matter what, God is going to complete his perfect plan and that his followers will be reunited under his kingdom. So kind of crazy dreams. I'm glad I wasn't the one that had to interpret or have those, but
yeah, can you imagine how scary that actually would be?
Yeah.
And you're like, I mean, the thing is, Daniel had interpreted dreams before, so this wasn't something that he, I don't know, he's probably had a lot of interesting and crazy dreams, but I mean, I can just,
because you can read, like, I wrote down that he tries to do his duties for his king and he has troubles doing that. He mourns for weeks and he can't eat rich foods or have fragrant lotion on him. And then one of them that it says he became deathly pale. And you're like, well, poor Daniel, like he's struggling. But the angel says, don't be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day you began to pray for understanding and to humble yourself before God, your request has been heard in heaven. I have come in answer to your prayer. Like he, through it all, was humbling himself before God and praying, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, we're reminded really that I would say if, but really when the worldly kingdoms fall, because they will fall. God's kingdom, we know, will remain forever. But James, how should that bring us true comfort today? I mean, what Johnny's talking about, I mean, it feels like scary stuff. But the reality is that as the kingdoms of the world fall, we know for sure that God's kingdom remains. So how does that bring us comfort?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely like a lot of ways. I think the first one just being like God reminds Daniel in his visions, and he reminds us just through his word and what we know about him that God is in control of it all. Like he has ordained all of these events to happen. He is sovereign, and not one of these things happening around us like surprises him. Like he expects it to happen, and he is in control even when it feels like he's not. I think, Johnny, the thing that you touched on, that they were receiving this vision while they were in exile, and it was a reminder that God told them that he would rescue them. That almost can be taken and made even more for us, because the truth is that God is coming soon. Like he's going to rescue us from this sinful and wicked world that we're in. And this vision that he's given Daniel is supposed to remind us about that. Like the fact that God's kingdom will last forever gives us so much hope, because there won't be any uncertainty and fear. We won't have to wonder if we should trust our leadership, because our leadership will be Jesus. Like God will be in charge. And when we look at Revelation, furthermore, Revelation 21:4 tells us that when we are in God's eternal kingdom, there will be no more sorrow, no more pain, no more death, and it'll just be perfect in a paradise. So
I love that.
Yeah.
It helps you just experience peace when you can push aside the fact that no matter what happens with worldly kingdoms, it doesn't matter, because God's kingdom not only lasts forever, but he's in control. He's in complete control. And so I hope that brings you peace, like it brings me peace as you walk through hard things, or just in our culture as we experience things that are unsettling or make us confused. Next week, we're going to be kind of jumping into a new perspective, because we get to take a look at the book of Ezra, and we're going to read how God kept his promise to send his people back home. So they're in Babylon, but he's going to send them back. I mean, God is faithful to keep his promises. And so I'm looking forward to this next series that we're going to have in Ezra. As we continue to travel through the Bible, we can be reminded of how faithful God is. And so we see that through the book of Daniel, but we're going to continue to see that and continue to see how he keeps his promises. So I hope that you'll dig into the scriptures, that you'll read the book of Daniel as we're ending this series. There's a lot involved there. There's a lot of kings mentioned. There's just a lot happening. And so I would encourage you to take a look at that for yourself and to do a little studying. We'll see you next week.